Sarah? Hello and welcome to the Sun Sentinel Editorial Board interview about Amendment 2 on medical marijuana. Last time, 2 years ago, we had a similar conversation with the people who were for and against the last effort to approve medical marijuana for use in Florida. And as you probably know, that amendment went down in defeat with about 58% of people voting for it, but with a 60% threshold needed, it came just short. This time the polls are showing that there's significant support for the amendment. We've heard that the amendment has been redone. We're going to talk more about that today. And we're going to, for about 45 minutes here, have a conversation about the pros and cons of whether you should vote for medical marijuana in Florida. With that, we're going to do self-introductions, and then we're going to go to questions. And if you have any questions on Facebook, please type them in, and we'll take a look and ask the questions that you'd like to have answered as well. So, Clarence, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening or good afternoon, whatever it may be there. My name is Clarence McKee. I'm a consultant to Drug Free Florida's Vote No on 2 campaign.
And I am Jessica Spencer. I am the Policy Director for Vote No on 2.
I'm Andrew Abramson with the editorial board.
Good evening. My name is Giselle Delgadillo. I am here with Ben, and I'm also here representing Canna Moms, which is mothers advocating for medical marijuana.
I'm Ben Polera. I'm the campaign manager for United for Care, advocating for Amendment 2.
Okay, Ben, let's start with you, and we're going to have a free-form conversation, so people please jump in if there's something you want to say. We are going to try to keep our answers a little short just to keep the conversation moving. But Ben, we saw that your side was here 2 years ago. Voters did not put it over the threshold. What's different this time, and why should people vote for your amendment?
Sure. Well, first of all, only in Florida is 58% considered a loss. But it is what it is, and we were back before the voters this November with an updated, revised, and I think better version of this constitutional amendment to provide medical marijuana to sick and suffering Floridians. So a couple things that we've done differently. First and foremost, we've considerably tightened up the definition of who qualifies for medical marijuana under this law. In the definition of debilitating medical condition, we've changed it to read, we have a list of conditions, and then, or other debilitating medical conditions of the same kind or class as or comparable to those enumerated, and for which a physician believes the medical use of marijuana would likely outweigh the potential health risk to a patient. And so it refers to a list that includes cancer, epilepsy, glaucoma, HIV, AIDS, PTSD, ALS, Crohn's disease, Parkinson's disease, MS. Those are all clearly debilitating diseases, so this is not marijuana for a hangnail. Additionally, we've clarified that patients under the age of 18 need to receive written parental consent not only in the physician's office, but it needs to be verified by the State Department of Health before they become a legal medical marijuana patient. And we've given the state of Florida additional responsibilities and duties as it relates to regulating caregivers. So previously, a caregiver could serve up to 5 medical marijuana patients. Now it is up to the department to determine how many patients they can or cannot serve, and also the department is specifically authorized to conduct background checks on those caregivers.
Okay, let's stop there. Jessica, let's go to you. So they have significantly addressed some of the concerns that were 2 years ago. What do you think about the changes in this one, and what are your concerns now?
I certainly wouldn't use the word significantly, but I appreciate Ben's position on that. This is really, again, de facto legalization of marijuana. The or other conditions, from 2014, they put in, this extra language. However, it still says the same thing. It's just fancier, bigger words that are saying or other conditions.
How does it say that?
Because when you actually read the language that Ben nicely read out for you, or other debilitating medical conditions of the same kind or class as or comparable to those enumerated. Well, that's the same thing. It's or other conditions. It's any of the symptomology that will fall under the conditions that are listed, like before, will actually qualify for marijuana. So nothing has changed as far as that goes.
But do you see, when you compare HIV or cancer or multiple sclerosis, last time around it was like, well, we could be prescribed for a hangnail. do you see in that language that it could still be prescribed for a hangnail?
Well, and it's recommended, it's not a prescription. So that is this misconception that I'm so glad that we are able to actually live stream, and the viewers will be able to go back and see this too. It didn't write hangnail in there last time either, but we are still looking at language that says or other conditions. So
Or other
a
debilitating.
It says
hangnail.
other similar conditions, correct, of ones that are.
But remember, symptomology of those conditions would then qualify. So if a symptom, let's say maybe of a hangnail, which is that's a little stretching it.
What's a good example of something realistic? That
Great example, PTSD. That is a mental health condition. There are different symptoms that fall under PTSD, anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping, etc. That, based on the way it's written, would qualify on their own as anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping, as a condition that you could get a recommendation for, which is what we were concerned with in 2014. Again, the other conditions would qualify.
Other debilitating conditions.
Debilitating, that is up to who?
A physician.
Well, Ben,
But-
what about that example of PTSD? Someone has anxiety. You know, her example right there.
Listen, first of all, it's a decision that should be made in the context of the doctor-patient relationship, and it's a decision that should be made individually, right? There are people who have mild anxiety that get through their days. There are people who have such severe anxiety that they cannot leave their house for days on end, right? That is patently a debilitating medical condition, right? There are people with the other point not the hangnail was marijuana for a headache, right? There are people that have headaches. I have headaches. I take Advil. But there are people who have crippling migraines that leave them, again, bedridden, house-ridden for days on end. My headache that I treat with Advil is not a debilitating medical condition. The one that leaves somebody, unable to work or function for a day or days on end is a debilitating medical condition. The bottom line is that it's a decision that should be made at the doctor-patient level. Not by us, not by politicians.
Shouldn't a doctor have some scientific evidence to show that marijuana actually makes a difference in the course of treatment for somebody with PTSD or these other conditions? Is there any evidence that marijuana, medical grade marijuana, can alleviate or improve or treat or cure some of the conditions that you're talking about?
There's certainly a growing body of evidence to suggest that, yeah. And the other thing is doctors on a daily basis recommend courses of treatment that are not FDA-approved pharmaceuticals. They recommend exercise, they recommend dietary supplements, dietary changes, meditation, things like that. So no, marijuana is not prescribed. It is not an FDA-regulated drug in the way that a lot of other things are, but there's a wide berth of options for physicians to recommend non-pharmaceutical treatments to their patients and do so in a safe way, and marijuana should be one of them, like it is in 25 other states.
At the same time, Jessica, I mean, do you believe it's better for sick patients to take highly addictive pharmaceutical prescriptions if these people have tried marijuana and feel that it helps them and they don't need to take addictive medication?
There's two issues there. One, that they believe is working for them, and that they have these terrible conditions. If you are experiencing cancer, HIV/AIDS, those sorts of things, I don't think anyone would argue that. No one's going to take issue. The problem is when it opens the door for those other things. And the thing when we describe a headache versus a migraine and, oh, I take Advil and, oh, the other person's off on the floor, well, those are subjective. So we're right back to the pain and the overprescribing of those prescription drugs and the subjective trying to figure out, well,
Subjective to the professional opinion of the treating physician.
I'm going to continue to speak instead of being consistently interrupted. And so with that, and trying to figure out what science says and what science tells us, and what we know about these prescription drugs. The other issue is that the prescription drugs that we have predictable known side effects. We know when we go into a pharmacy that if we take our Advil, if we take our whatever, we know what side effects to look for. We know how much to take. We know what to take it with. We know what to not take it with. We don't have any such parameters or regulations on this amendment for the products that will be sold. There is no regulating how much THC can be in them, how much CBD can be in them. It's not in there.
Let me interrupt
But
just
the
a
doctor
second
does.
if I could, and I'll get to you too. I think I just heard you say that nobody would take exception with using it for certain conditions, but that there's these other conditions that, is sort of the issue. But isn't it right now illegal for a doctor to give or prescribe or,
Exactly.
dispense marijuana for somebody who does have cancer and
No.
is suffering?
No.
They can now dispense it?
They can recommend, it's not a prescription.
And where would they go to get it?
There are about 100 physicians right now that can go to the Department of Health website and look and see what physicians are registered and have taken that coursework. There are 3 laws here in the state of Florida that allow people to use marijuana if they so choose. That is here already that we can work with and say, let's add other conditions, let's take away conditions, let's put regulations on how much THC or CBD
No, but
is
my
required.
question is, I thought you said that, so if I have cancer, and I'm just going to be honest, I have had cancer and I have gone through chemotherapy, and when I went through chemotherapy, somebody sent me some joints in the mail, and I got to tell you that I was so horribly sick. And when I smoked, and I got that Marinol stuff, and that didn't do anything. And when I did smoke the joints, and it was in a place where I didn't have access, somebody I worked with sent it to me, and it gave me relief. But if it comes back, and I have to go through chemotherapy again, where would my doctor be able to give me marijuana right now?
Not the low-grade marijuana.
Not the Charlotte's
You
Web.
would have to ask your physician if they had taken the course and if they were registered. Who knows? You would
So
have to
it's-
ask your physician.
Okay, so
And a lot of
You could
physicians
get a
don't take-
marijuana. You could get a marijuana oil or extract with basically no THC that would have almost none of the palliative qualities of the marijuana that you smoked.
Okay, so I wouldn't really be able to get
Probably not.
No.
the help that I got last time.
Unless not one but 2 doctors had diagnosed you to be 12 months or less terminal.
Yeah.
Now, do you
I'd
think
have
it's
to be
better for
terminal?
somebody? Now, for somebody that was in her position, do you think it would be better for her to take, let's say, OxyContin or something that's very strong?
Well, we're comparing apples and oranges, but again, we go back to your original question of I thought I heard you say that no one would take issue with it. Yeah, to be honest, I don't think anyone would take issue with that. And none of it, that's the problem
But
with
it's
it. This
not
is so,
able
but
for
it,
people now.
well,
or
that's what they don't
available.
want you to know is that it is able and it has been under different laws that we have here. The issue is too is no one would
Is that
argue.
true?
No, absolutely
Well, of
not.
course he's gonna
And
say
listen,
it's not.
Giselle, by the way, can speak personally to what is going on currently because her son is a patient.
Yeah,
Okay.
my son has Dravet syndrome, which is what Charlotte has. Now, I had to get my license in California. I went to get my medical card. I had to move there for a couple of months with a friend just to get this. I was put on a waiting list. When I finally was able to get it, it didn't work for him because it was just the high CBD. Now, my son was taking one of the medications FDA approved, and that caused him drug-induced lupus, which was supposed to help him with seizures, but instead it was giving him lupus, so the doctor took him off of it right away. The next day, my son's having 300 seizures a day. I became desperate. I took off to California. I started giving him high THC. And that was the only thing that I found relief with to stop those 300 seizures.
How
If
many seizures does he have now?
He will have maybe 5 a week, but not grand mals. Like he'll have little ones, but this
And are
one's-
you able to give him this marijuana
No.
in Florida?
I was not. I came back, I spoke with my doctor. My doctor prescribed Marinol. By giving him Marinol, he was just agitated, constantly crying. He wouldn't stop. And I told him, I can't give him this. I have to go back to the oil. Then he put him in a study. So the study was sort of helping. But I had to find ways to go back to California and stay there with him again and start giving him THC as opposed to giving him Diastat every time he had a seizure. Now, the law that was passed here is the high CBD, low THC. I went to, when it first opened, I went to the grow house. The oil, I will have to find a doctor. My doctor recommends medical marijuana for my son. He saw the changes, but he hasn't taken the course. He cannot take the course right now because he hasn't been able to. But why would I spend extra money buying an oil that I already know I tried it on my son and it didn't work? When I know that higher THC will work for him. My doctor also prescribed another non-FDA approved drug, which is a veterinarian drug. So it's okay for him to take a veterinarian drug, which is non-FDA, but it's not okay for him to take cannabis, which we saw personally how it was helping him.
So you have to go back and forth to California and spend time in California in order to get
Yes.
this thing
Yes,
that helps your
yes,
son.
yes.
Clarence, what would you say to
I'd
that?
say I feel I have a lot of empathy and concern for you and your son, but when you take a look at this, at the real language here about other conditions, it's like the old pill mills we had in Florida. It's whatever the doctor that you go to thinks is debilitating to you. And you've got a group of doctors in other states, about 10% of them out of the total population making a lot of money giving out these recommendations. This is why the Obama administration said about 3-4 weeks ago, no, we're not going to take marijuana off the Schedule 1 list because, number one, there's no accepted medical use, the drug chemistry is not known, there's no adequate safety studies, and there are no adequate and well-controlled studies providing efficacy. The drug is not accepted by qualified experts, and the scientific evidence is not widely available. It kind of perpetuates a fraud on people because marijuana is illegal in the state of Florida in terms of the federal law. And this amendment is very careful. It says, hey, this does not make you immune from any other federal law. The other point is, I understand there are children like your child who have these situations. But here's one of the big dangers of this law, if it became a law, is where it talks about food. You put this in the food, like you probably, for your son, would want to give him gummies or something like that.
I actually just give him oil.
Oil.
Yeah.
But the point is, over 4,000 children in the last year have been reported to the poison control centers because they're getting a hold of, by accident, it's in the pantry, these little brownies that are infused with marijuana or the gummies that look like real candy. It's very, very dangerous. And that's why in the state of Colorado and the state of Washington right now, they're writing regulations to ban any use of marijuana in edibles that look like things that kids would be attracted to.
But
And
we
it's totally
still
out of
have
control.
FDA approved that look like gummies, and kids are attracted to it. And I believe it's the parents' responsibility because my pantry, I have a lot of medication that my daughter could take, and she will end up in the hospital. She takes my son's
Exactly.
clonazepam.
That's
It's
right.
disintegrating. So it's up to me to keep that away from her, to teach her. So I keep it in a safe place so nobody takes my son's medication, whether it's oil, whether it's FDA approved, because I don't want my son or my daughter reaching out to that and getting poisoned
Well,
with that. And I know, I even had a friend, she takes clonazepam. It's a great example. She came
What is
over.
clonazepam?
It's a benzo, and it's for seizures, and a lot of adults use it for anxiety, to help with sleep. So my friend was addicted to those. She came over my house. She was taking her Xanax. She was drinking a beer. What did I do? I became scared. So what did I do with my clonazepam? I had to hide it, so she wouldn't reach out for it because she was staying over for the weekend, and I'm like, this is my son's medication. I don't need her reaching out to his meds because she knows I had it. So I had to hide it from her too,
Exactly.
and this is an adult.
Well, you're a responsible parent, but what is happening, as they said by some investigator, the drug investigators in Colorado were saying, it's not the responsible parents we're worried about. For example, they say, you have little kids that accidentally get into this stuff, they don't know any better, or you might have a babysitter who innocently gives it to a kid, or you have friends. Well, the babysitter wouldn't know that this brownie in the cabinet is full of marijuana. So that's where all these dangers come. And we're not talking about good parents like you. It's the others who are
They're
good.
usually labeled too. Every edible, because when I was in Colorado,
In a
when I
bag.
was in California, edibles were labeled. And it says contains certain amount of THC, do not dispose to children. So
And at the quinceañera a couple of weeks ago in California, it was a bowl full of gummies that nobody knows where it came from, and I'm sure it was in a bag that was labeled, but it now is in a bowl, and there's 19 people in the hospital that have no idea
but
that they
the same
ingested
as
this.
happens with the medications with pills.
The notion,
Like,
So then
There's-
so then make sure
the
there is
notion that
no
you should
limit.
oppose a law because people will break the law or because people are irresponsible is just silly.
But the
I
fact
mean,
that you
that's-
know that
then you
people
can
are
use-
irresponsible,
You can use that same logic to oppose essentially any law.
you should have written it in your amendment. There's no word maximum on
But
an
is Well, that
amendment.
the
You
same
should have
thing?
put
murder
that in
shouldn't
there.
be illegal because people are going to kill people
We have
anyway.
alcohol.
So
What
what's the
about
point of making
alcohol?
root beers? Alcoholic root beers that are in fridges. I mean, those are legal. They look just like root beer, hard lemonade.
And so do the cannabis.
Right, but I'm saying
Liquids as well.
those are legal. I've never heard of talk of making those illegal.
They're already legal. Marijuana is not.
So you're saying that alcohol, though that shouldn't be legal.
So we're gonna
The pony
punish
is
the
already out of the
patients
stable.
because of people's responsibility.
Well, when
I
you
don't
get-
think my son should be punished.
Well-
No, you go
and be
back to the
put-
drawing board and make sure that those people are protected.
Exclude it from
So it
food.
should be the same for the FDA-approved medications and for alcohol as well. Then
Which, by the way, the veterinarian medications are FDA because it's the same
It's not
medications that
FDA.
humans get.
I have
know,
to pay
it's
for
the
it
same
because it's
thing.
not FDA approved. It's a veterinarian drug that my doctor prescribed, but I have to go and pay for it
Because it's
not
off-label,
FDA.
because it's for
4-year-old
veterinary
is taking
proof
dog
for use, but it is
tranquilizers, but
FDA.
marijuana oil is a step too far. That's the
And it's
position
shown
you're
that it
taking.
has helped him. It stopped. He's not having 300 seizures a day. My doctor tried every single drug available for Dravet syndrome. They haven't worked. So why is it not okay for him to take an oil that is helping him, that can save his life? I have to wait until he has 12 months to live to be able to obtain that THC oil for him? I don't think it's fair.
I think
I don't
Clarence
want my
made a
son
really good
having
point
12
that
months.
this is not about you and your son and your parenting, because clearly you are doing what you feel is best and what's right to protect the other children in your home. This issue is about what will happen to the other millions of people that we will be subjected to this, and protecting them and protecting the people in our state.
Here's what these look like. I don't, you probably can't see it, but a little 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid grabs this and they can die.
Oxycontin's going to be looking like that too. They already said it. They were
And
gonna-
that's medical. Those are
But
medical.
you know,
It's
Clarence,
legal.
on that point, can't, you know, I remember when Joe Cool or the Camel,
cigarettes.
the Camel, you
Exactly.
know, and then, you know what, government got involved in regulations. And so what happens in, the reason, you know, it's a constitutional amendment, it's sort of here's the parameters, but then government can get involved in regulations. Isn't there a way to allow Giselle's son to still have access to something before he gets terminal, and create packaging that makes clear that this is a medicine and it is not candy? Can't government get involved at the regulation
You're
stage?
absolutely right, but not through a constitutional amendment, which is like cement. Do it like the legislature
But
did here.
regulations follow
Well,
constitutional
well,
amendments. It's how it works.
Well, if you
Only
take
enacting
it,
the plain
if you take a look at the regulations on last year's law and Charlotte's Web, an administrative law judge said 2 days ago, they're all confused. It took them 3 years to get this done. First thing is get the legislature to do what she wants done.
And how has that worked?
Well, they have done it 2 years.
They have
last
not.
2
The
years.
legislature has not done it.
They did it
or
with the
they've done
terminally
it so
ill,
poorly.
and they've done it with
They've done it
the
with
Charlotte's
what?
Web.
Terminally
The
ill.
terminally ill. That's
The Florida House quit working in 2015.
well,
They
take
just
that up with
stopped.
the Florida
Well,
House.
Speak.
Listen,
I've
you all, you know, and I respect your ability to voice your opinion here, but you all have been consistently intellectually dishonest about your opposition to this. You were reflexively always, for any reason, way, shape, or form, opposed to reform of marijuana
It's
laws,
not
whether
medicine.
medical or otherwise.
medicine.
And
medicine.
it doesn't
So I
matter if we
shouldn't be
change the
working on my
constitutional
son.
amendment, because you're always going to be opposed. And you say there's a better way to do this. Guess what? Go lobby for a better way to do it. You've never done it. You only oppose these things. You don't suggest productive solutions. You only stand in opposition to people like her son getting help.
Not true. The point
True.
is, this
What
is,
have you done
that's
to
not,
lobby? Have
that-
you done any lobbying to make? And you just pointed at this and said it's this language. And last time it was Dr. Stephanopoulos, and she's like, you know, we object to the wording because the diseases aren't specific enough. So this time it sounds like the diseases are more specific, and the issue of caretakers is, and the issue of kids is up. But now you're saying the language isn't specific enough. And in the 2 years since, I might be unaware of what you've done in Tallahassee to try to encourage.
So that's okay.
What have you done in the last 2 years to try to make the wording one that would be acceptable
we
to
weren't the
you?
proponents
well,
of this.
for
They
the-
would be the ones to try to
Right,
say
So
for
it.
the
you're just
amendment,
opponents
but-
of it in general.
The way that's
Well, there's
written,
two.
exactly.
There's two
and
issues.
the concept in general.
The concept
No.
is wrong because, number one, it's an illegal drug. It's been stated very clearly that by the Obama administration pretty much tells you everything you need to know as to why it should not be done. And they made a really good point about the people who are proponents of legalization, either for recreational and medical use, even though they mean well, It's a bad bill. It's a
think
bad
you
You
were
say
saying
the
the
concept.
Obama administration, you're referring to the DEA, correct?
Yeah.
No,
hey,
no.
You were misrepresenting the
Be-
position of the
be-
Obama administration.
Excuse me, before the DEA even said a thing, if you go to the White House Office of Drug Policy, on their website, it lists all of these things, all the reasons. Marijuana use poses significant risk to the public health. Increased availability leads to increased health and safety costs. Legalization will not solve public health or safety challenges such as you face. And they've said this for 3-4 years ago. But no one wants to admit that.
President Obama has said that.
That's what he says.
President Obama has said that marijuana is as safe or safer than alcohol. That people should.
I don't
not go-
care what he
that people
said.
should- well,
It's
you're
what
talking about
his-
the Obama
it's
administration. That
what
people
his
should not
White
go to jail
House
for it.
has
that
on the web right now.
The Eric Holder Justice Department issued directives to U.S. attorneys across the country telling them not to prosecute
Unless-
medical marijuana
no,
businesses.
not true.
He gives
Totally.
qualifications.
Said you
He
cannot-
made qualifications.
If they start selling
he-
it to kids, or if they start doing it across state lines,
Correct.
states attorneys
With
can act.
every law has qualifications. Yes,
That's a big one,
with
selling it to kids.
qualifications, nobody sells to kids,
The
and
other
that's why
point
they haven't
before
made
we
any
do- before we
prosecutions
run out of
since then.
time, here's the other
That's the
social
lobbying
impact of this.
question.
Hold on, Clarence.
Go ahead.
Just a
And the
second. Sorry.
DEA did liberalize
Jessica
marijuana
and Andrew.
laws in their, even as they are reaffirmed.
We'll just sit here.
Just a growing
It's a hot topic.
for research.
Okay.
You wanna go ahead?
So
You guys-
Jessica,
Well, because I would like to address
Please,
that question, and I would
please.
also address. I'd like to address, and I was not aware that Ben has cameras on me 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So that's a little creepy.
When
so
did
that
he say that?
Well, he said that I've never been out lobbying, so
Have
that's
you?
just odd.
Did you
Have
register
you?
to lobby?
We have been, well, you don't have to, you can lobby as an individual and you can go to these meetings and speak with your legislators about, let's work with your bills that you have. We were not approached by John Morgan on how to help write this to work with him. But for up in Tallahassee and speaking to those and our local representatives, yes, of course we have. Because heaven forbid they
You have
try to
what?
spoken with them and worked with them on their language and, well, what should this include? Or, hey, add this condition because there are individuals that are looking for that. Of course we have. So,
So
out-
what do you
That's
support? Tell
outrageous.
me what you support.
I support not snake oil medicine, and the fact that we are not Neanderthals. We are in the 21st century. We need studies, and we do have studies.
So when you say that you were saying include this, what do you support? Because I'm still hearing what you don't support.
There needs to be regulate, like I just said to Ben, there isn't a word maximum in here. So if you care, we care about people, but what we also don't talk about is the people that are negatively affected by
But do you
this.
support any medical marijuana for anything?
The regular, regular THC marijuana, not the low grade.
There is no data that shows that those are working for any
So
condition.
you don't support it for anything?
I support the study and the research because we are not in the 18th century. We need to look at the side effects or the symptomology before. Did you get the placebo or did you get whatever amount of THC or CBD there was? We're talking about a plant that has over 500 chemicals in it. And there's no regulation on how much CBD, THC of whichever class, how much should be in there. So when you have a study and you can say, instead of anecdotally this helps or doesn't help, you have the symptomology before, the placebo or the particular one that you're using, the symptomology after, and you can tell if it worked or
Okay.
didn't work. That's
Ben-
how we do science and medicine in the
Ben,
real world.
are there studies underway, clinical studies with marijuana? Are there allowed to be clinical studies on marijuana?
Yes.
There are more and more that are happening. A lot have been happening outside of the United States recently, although with the DEA reaffirming marijuana's Schedule I status at the federal government, they've also opened it up to research. But really, it's been very, very difficult to do any sort of substantive research on marijuana because of the federal prohibition. And most of the research that's been done on marijuana in the last 50 years has been like, let's find out how bad this stuff is,
And
right?
that's-
And it's been funded by
completely
people like
untrue.
Jessica, or the people that fund Jessica rather.
Now, Ben, I want to switch gears. I'm going to switch gears for a second. I want to ask,
Mel Sembler,
if-
some old lady from Publix.
if this does pass, right now you have 5 growers in the state and be given these licenses. Obviously, the legislature is going to has the ability to blow everything up and change it. What do you guys favor as the policy moving forward? Do you
In terms of implementation?
Yeah, do you prefer a vertically integrated system? What do you prefer? What do you?
I mean, I think, first of all, I think the 5 or 6 or 7, depending on how people's litigation goes, licenses are not enough to serve a geographically and population-wise very large state like Florida, and that I also believe the current regulation that requires vertical integration basically puts a lot of small business people out of the
What
potential
does that
ability.
mean, in case our
It-
viewers don't know?
the current law requires, if for these 6 people now who have licenses to grow marijuana under the current law, it requires them to do so soup to nuts, right? They have to grow it, harvest, process, ship, and retail all under
The
one
same
license.
people grow, distribute,
Correct.
sell, same people profit. So would you prefer opening up? Would you have a limit to licenses? What do you believe is the best system?
I mean, I believe the best system is there is a set of pretty stringent minimum qualifications at the state level, and then beyond that, it is up to local government to determine what is best for their communities.
But you don't think it should be up to local, so let me make sure I understand. So local communities can regulate how they want it in their communities. From a state level, you don't believe there should be a limit to how many
I'm not
companies can get a license?
opposed to a limit. I think there probably will be a limit, but I think it really should be up to local governments to decide how best to implement this.
And
in
you
their
oppose
communities.
vertical integration
I don't
requirement?
I oppose the requirement.
Requirement.
If somebody wants to be vertically integrated, great, but I think it is a requirement that, especially under the requirements of the current law, requires you to have $5 or $10 million in capital, which naturally excludes a lot of people from even potentially profiting in the business. But again, this isn't about profit. This is about helping people. But there needs to be businesses that serve those people and that offer quality products and offer competitive pricing. And I don't think you can do that with 6 people who hired the most expensive lobbyists in Tallahassee, serving the whole state as a cabal.
And you mentioned a good point. You talked about local regulation. The dirty little secret about this whole legalization business, medical or otherwise, is that, as the Denver Post found out, Denver's zoning rules are sending marijuana business to poor neighborhoods in Virginia, in Colorado, in Washington, and California.
Is it recreational? Hasn't Colorado? Is Colorado
They've got
one of the
both.
states that has so that's a different thing
No,
than
no,
what
no.
you're talking
Pot,
about.
just
Right,
generally.
that's recreation.
Whether it's
Yeah.
well,
We're not talking about
no,
recreational.
no. What you could,
We're talking
the issue on
medical, right?
no pot is pot, and what happens is you can go get it from these caregivers. You're a caregiver, you give me some. I can go down the street and I can sell it to her who's not a patient. But the point is,
you can't legally.
whoever, no, not legal, exactly. The point is,
More expensive
this
to
stuff,
get it medically.
these pot shops are popping up in low-income neighborhoods. You know, and you got in the city of Palm Beach recently, the zoning commission said, oh gosh, we can't have it in residential areas. In several counties, in cities around Florida, maybe 22, are doing the same thing. Watch what's going to happen. They're going to wind up in the little poorer areas. So, for example, in Seattle, I think there's a place called Uncle Ike's, and there's a rapper in Seattle, a black guy. He's got a song out that says, here's Uncle Ike's. Got the biggest pot house deep in the heart of the inner city. He's getting $50,000 to $100,000 a week for selling this stuff, where young black kids were getting arrested 4 years ago for doing the same thing. And they're not going to put this stuff on Los Olas, and they're not going to put it on Broward Boulevard. Watch where it's going to go. That's the other issue that's not brought up. And then the other
So
argument...
that's sort of you're saying our local cities will not let
Not in my neighborhood.
dispensaries go,
Oh.
but they'll let it go into black neighborhoods.
Lower income. Out in Seattle, there's black, there's Hispanic, but they talk about lower income.
Okay.
That's where it's going to go.
Okay.
The other
And, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The
Yeah.
other issue to remember with that is, you know, there's this whole idea of, and I got an email from the Yes on 2 campaign maybe an hour or so ago that says, oh, there's this misconception that we won't be able to regulate where they're located. But we can't, because it's not specifically written in here. So now, if I try to zone or regulate where these shops are located, not within 1,000 feet of a school, or whatever you come up with, you have now violated the Constitution. Now, there's the other side.
Didn't PolitiFact take that on and say that was mostly false?
But what's so interesting is in PolitiFact, throughout that entire article, they're saying, oh, that's true, that's true, that's true. And I was like, Josh, really? It didn't even make any sense by the time he got to his mostly false.
They called it premature because they said it's going to be up to the state to make regulations and then local communities will
Right,
decide for
because
themselves.
you can only enact plain language for an amendment. So once you go back in and you try to say, I'm going to zone or regulate where this is from, well, the plain language doesn't say
There's
that
no
you're
plain
able to do
language
that.
that addresses it.
Right, it doesn't
Pres-
say it away.
exactly.
And if the plain language
That's
doesn't-
exactly
if
the
the
point.
plain language doesn't address it, you don't presume that something exists that does not.
Precisely.
Will
So
it
you don't
be-
presume
will-
that you'll be able to zone and regulate it. Thank you, Ben. You made my point for me. I appreciate it.
I'm
Your
sorry, I-
maze of circular logic is causing a debilitating headache.
But to her
Well-
point, will cities be able to say, we don't want a dispensary within 1,000 feet of a school?
Yeah, I believe so.
If the state would have to
What
say.
would need
this-
to happen?
What do you mean, what would need to happen?
In order for a city to say we don't want a dispensary within 1,000 feet of a school, what would have to happen for a city to be able to do that?
Well, they need to pass an ordinance.
And would the legislature have to pass something that allowed them to pass an ordinance? Or
Uh,
not?
I think the legislature could. I don't think they would have to.
Right, does
Okay.
the state will first have to decide if they leave it up to the cities, is that correct? And then the cities from there can pass ordinances?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I mean, listen, we have in the constitutional amendment in our limitation section, number 8, nothing in this section shall affect or repeal laws relating to negligence or professional malpractice, blah, blah, blah. That first clause in that statement, nothing in this section shall affect or repeal laws, that is a standard throughout any constitutional amendment, unless it is specifically cited. If something doesn't exist, is not affected or repealed.
And do you believe,
Right,
do you believe the state won't leave it up to the cities? Don't you think they will allow the cities to?
So given
Because here,
the opposite of what how Jessica read this, given that we do not address zoning in this, that means it is entirely within the bounds of the state, and if not the state, then, and I don't know, the regulations between home rule charter or whatever, a state needs to respect in terms of local government, but it is between those two to determine that.
The cities and counties doing this right now, they're doing it in anticipation of your amendment passing, but they're doing it based upon the existing law, Charlotte's and the new one, and where it can be sold.
Right.
That's their foundation. But in Palm Beach and elsewhere, they're saying, oh, this will also apply if it comes up with the 10 times more powerful THC. They want to regulate that. So they're just laying the foundation for it.
Right.
But
The legal
constitutional-
challenges, we'll see.
They're laying the
Constitutional
foundation
law
because if
supersedes
this
all
law
other law.
doesn't pass, all these businesses are going out of business. There are no patients. There are very few doctors to recommend this. The recommendation.
The ones now are going to go out of business?
They will go out of business if Amendment 2 does not pass, or they're going to have to,
In Charlotte's Web,
possibly
no, it's
go.
gone.
Nobody's
Because there's no market for it, is what you're saying? There's
they
no
got-
market?
These people that won these licenses got a $5 or $10 million bill with the winning of the licenses to set up this operation. There is not patients who will benefit from this medical marijuana that will go out and get it, that will buy enough product from them for them to keep their doors open. So it is ephemeral. This notion of a medical marijuana law in Florida, unless we pass this, or unless
So if
if
we
we
pass
fail,
this-
these guys better spend $500,000 on lobbyists
We
every
pass
session
this-
because
We don't
they got no
pass Amendment
business.
2, and all those poor kids and people and terminally ill people will be out of luck because they can't provide
there's
enough,
not
right?
enough patients now, and we already have we have the dispensary, we have True Leaf, it's one of them. They got approved already to start dispensing. So far, they've probably dispensed maybe 3 that I've seen on the news, but I haven't
A
seen.
camera's there every time somebody buys products. It's that novel.
Let me ask you this, what are the tax implications for medical marijuana for local communities? In terms of
I don't-
once
again,
shops are open, once they're dispensaries, I mean, does it bring?
Not having addressed it specifically in this law, it would be the impetus would be on the state and local governments to address those issues of taxation.
We don't tax drugs, do we?
Exactly.
But we would tax,
I don't believe
How is it
we
done in
should.
other states where there's medical generally?
They don't tax.
It depends on the state.
Yeah.
It's only recreational
States with
generally?
medical and recreational, like Colorado, I believe it's like a 10% sales tax on medical marijuana and like 25 or 30% on recreational. Some states take the position that, this is medical marijuana, it's medicine, it shouldn't be taxed. I think that's the right position. I think it is highly doubtful that our state takes that position. But
Do you
I
think they
it is
will
the right
tax
one.
it? And it'll,
I think they will.
and then it would
tax
bring tax revenue seemingly to the cities where the dispensaries are?
Yeah.
And then I'll argue and find an attorney to fight that, well, we don't tax medicine, so why am I paying tax on my product? And the other thing, too, is we need to remember that constitutional law supersedes all other law, period. So if the Constitution does not have it written in there that you can zone and regulate, they have to enact the plain language only. So anything that we are doing underneath that will not qualify, and I have a right then to sue you for violating my constitutional right to own a business, get medicine, not be taxed, etc. That is a huge thing that people really need to understand, that a constitutional law is of and above all other law, and they should have gotten more specific if they cared.
his point that this does not what was your point, that it doesn't supersede other laws?
Right, but look at the fair district. We just went through this. Mr. McKee just mentioned this. We just went through this with fair districting. And just because it says that doesn't mean anything, because
No, but
We already know that, and excuse me, yet again, we already know that constitutional law, no matter what you write in it, still supersedes state law, county,
you're not
and
saying
city.
anything, Jessica. You're not saying anything, and you're wrong. Okay? If it's not in here, it's not affected. And it is within the rights of the legislature and the department and local governments to do something about it. I wrote the law.
You just said
When
it's
we're
not in
talking
there,
about,
so they're
when-
not
listen,
within their
when
rights
we're talking
to do
about constitutional law at a real high level, at the United States level, not the Florida Constitution that has pregnant pigs in it and that has all sorts of stupid things that people put in it. This is not a sacred document. Let's just dispense with that notion. But you're just not paying attention to how this actually works in practice. This is not how a bill becomes a law. This is not Schoolhouse Rock here. You're ignoring the law and what will take place under implementation, and you're assigning all these things to this law that are not in the plain language. You keep talking about the plain language. They're not there. So you can't just make them up.
So why is the Florida Medical Association against it?
Because the Florida Medical Association is an arm of the Republican Party of
No,
Florida,
come
and
on.
and they're an arm of the anti-trial lawyers, and John Morgan's a trial lawyer. I think that is a
It's
big
all-
part of it.
It's all personal because of Mr. Morgan?
Or political?
think-
You don't believe it's political?
Doctors?
The Florida
No.
Medical
this
Association
whole
is a
thing is
political
political,
organization, just
yeah.
like this
Okay, but-
campaign committee is a political
so
organization, just like yours is a political
The Florida
organization.
Medical Association is against it, but why? I thought I saw a poll that like 80% of Floridians do support it. So, okay, the FMA,
They're doctors.
but, yeah, but they are a political, the FMA is an organization that's
every trade
involved in lobbying.
association
But
is
what,
political,
right,
basically.
exactly. So, but why, what do you think explains the support, the 80% support,
It sounds great.
including among Republicans?
I'll tell you why.
Why?
I'll tell you, here's what the White House said about it.
No, I
No,
want,
no.
I want to know what Clarence said. Why do you
Popular
think
culture, popular culture.
And read the
pot,
ballot summary.
Weed. It says, confusing messages being presented by popular culture, media, proponents of medical marijuana, perpetuate the false notion that marijuana is harmless. This significantly diminishes efforts to keep our young people drug-free.
So you think
No.
80% of Floridians are just misinformed? That
Oh,
that
the
they're
pot culture, I mean, golly, all over the place.
I am not a pothead, and
not
I am
talking
for
about
it
you.
because
We're not
it's for
talking
my
about you.
son,
talking
and my
about you.
doctor recommends it for
The
my
media
son.
culture says this is great, generally.
Why,
All
wait,
the
why
messages are
has
good.
your side not received as much support, donations this time? I believe the sheriff's organization last time supported your side. This side has stayed out of it. Pam Bondi as well. Why is there just less support
Well,
for your
this was
side
a
this
big
time?
election year. 2 years ago, a lot of the sheriffs went up for re-election. Not that that would have made a big point, but
And they have come out, they do have a statement. They
Individual,
have come
yeah.
out even the Florida Sheriff's Association has a statement this year. But again, to Clarence's point, which I'm not a political operative like Ben is, I don't know how that whole thing works, but from what I understand, it's quieter now because it is actually an election year, but their stance is still the same.
They haven't supported any money? Is it the same?
No, they
The
didn't have any
sheriff?
They
money.
have no stance on Amendment 2 this time around.
Yes, they do. Yes, it's right there on their website. I'll pay for your internet access.
don't go to pot. What's the website?
Don't let Florida go to
Don't let
pot.
Florida go to pot. And they're on there.
And how do you explain
Just because
the
you all haven't changed your
80%?
website in 2 years doesn't mean
Again,
that
it goes
percentage
back
is
to,
opposed
I'm not a political operative, I don't know. I
But
know
you
in
told
my
me that
field,
you
as
told
a
me
as
that
a
you were-
prevention professional,
But didn't you say that you were meeting with all these lawmakers and
Yeah.
trying to help? But then you tell me you're not political?
Well, she didn't register.
well,
to
just
lobby.
because I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not a registered lobbyist. I'm
Okay.
a prevention professional and
Okay,
an
so
addiction
why do
professional.
80% of people right now say that they support medical marijuana?
I think you said it right. It's the misperception. It's the misconception. This has been an industry that has been sneaking its way in for the last 30 to 40 years, and we see it more now. Clarence made the point of
Cheech and Kong. wasn't it?
well, that's the other thing
That's
too.
100
People
years ago.
generally think in my generation and the baby boomer generation, they think, it's no big deal. It's just pot. What is the problem? Like, I just had some Doritos, I burned my bra at Woodstock, and whatever, whoop-de-doo.
10 times the
That's
power.
not what we're dealing with now, and people do not understand that and don't recognize that even at my age and the baby boomer generation. They do not understand that this is not that low THC marijuana. And that is the problem because
But
this opens the door for all of it.
This is medical grade marijuana.
No
That's
such
the
thing.
other-
What do you mean medical
Really?
grade?
That is the
No,
other,
By the way,
no medical
I lost
marijuana.
count of the number of times Jessica insulted the electorate of Florida. What was it, like 5, 6? I mean, it's just.
Well,
your
because I'm
argument-
defending the electorate
No,
of
you're
Florida.
interrupting him.
Yeah, imagine that.
Medical
That's a
marijuana is
first.
popular because the people of Florida are stupid, is what I heard from you. Because we've pulled the wool over, Cheech and Chong have pulled the wool over their eyes, and, you know.
See, the thing,
It's
Ben,
just-
you think the electorate is stupid. We're trying to educate them because you think that they will just simply read the ballot summary, which sounds beautiful and is a misrepresentation when you actually read the rest of it. So what we're trying to do is educate them because you're the one that is trying to think they're stupid and don't understand how constitutional amendments work.
You've just got to educate them.
I'm gonna ask a question, Ben. Do you believe there should eventually be recreational marijuana in the state?
Yeah, personally, yes, but it's not
There you
my
go.
fight.
And that's the real reason.
It has nothing to do with. He just asked me a question about my opinion, and then you told me what my opinion was.
Do you
My
think this
opin-
makes it easier to eventually get to that step?
Not particularly.
We started.
No, I mean, listen.
With
if-
every state that has gone medical
the state
goes
legislature
recreational.
has shown itself to be completely incompetent in any number of ways, but particularly as it comes to issues of marijuana reform.
But
And
now
so
you
this
say
is
they're
not-
competent
and
enough
so
to
this
regulate
This is not going.
Interesting.
This is not. They've been doing it for 3 years. They've got a system finally. This
so we
is
don't need
not
an
going to be. This is not going to be done through the legislature. And John Morgan, in a similar interview to this with the Orlando Sentinel, said, "Under no circumstances am I funding any sort of legalization initiatives. If I do another constitutional amendment, it will be to raise the minimum wage." So, barring a major shift in public opinion and somebody with a lot of money coming in to run the campaign, I don't see it happening
So you
anytime in the
just
near
said that
future.
every state that passed medical marijuana has passed recreational
States,
marijuana?
states start, not every so far, but
That's what you
states that
said.
start with medical marijuana, they go to then recreational. And I don't know if we heard the silver tongue speak about how bad the legislature is, but
How
then
many
we'll
states
say,
How many states have licensed medical marijuana?
I think it's
25.
21 or
25.
23
And
plus
And
the
how many
district.
have passed recreational marijuana?
4 plus DC.
I want to say there's 6, but I'm not entirely sure.
There's
And
4.
then a couple on the ballot this time around?
Yes.
There's a lot on the ballot.
I think it's
Okay,
6
well.
that's on the ballot, yes.
And how much money is on the side to legalize medical marijuana?
We've got about 10% of what they have in the bank right now.
And how much money has been raised for medical marijuana?
Well, quite a bit more. Quite a bit of that was John Morgan's money to get us on the ballot. You know,
Give me a number, give me a number. How much money?
Since the beginning of the
Since this
4 years
campaign?
ago,
No, just
This-
in
this
this
cycle.
campaign,
$5 or $6 million.
5 or 6 million. And how much on your side?
For this cycle.
I think less than that.
1.8 million.
They've got
the-
1.8 and you've
But is
got
that
5
going
or
back
6?
to last?
No. We've got about 150 grand in the bank, and they've got about a $1.5 million based on the last
But does
report.
that mean that you've spent all your money and
We
they
s-
haven't spent theirs?
We spent our money getting on the ballot. We had to spend $4 million to get on the ballot. They just waited till we got on the ballot and then put money into account to attack us.
Okay.
What do you plan to
okay.
do with that money down the stretch? TV ads?
I don't write
T-
checks.
TV ads.
No
They just
idea.
they just started buying TV. They'll be up on TV the first week of October.
And you won't?
And what is the
We'll be-
message?
we'll be on
that-
soon
What is the
thereafter.
message? We might be coming close on our 45
Their
minutes,
message
are we?
is white guys with dreadlocks will sell you pot.
Oh, but,
our-
hey, hold it. Let me tell you something. Glad you mentioned that. In California, 32%, no, what is it? The vast majority. Oh, the average med pot user is a 32-year-old white guy
With dreadlocks.
with a history of drug abuse or alcohol abuse. That's who this really benefits, a bunch of white yuppies and millennials, really. The blacks who get involved in this are going to get arrested. Criminal justice.
Why is that?
Because one of the big myths is, from some groups, is that, well, if we come in with medical marijuana and legalize that, this disparity between black and white arrest rates for pot will go down. No? Pardon?
Nobody's ever said that when it comes to medical marijuana.
Oh, wait a minute.
This isn't about criminal justice reform.
CJ, that's
about-
the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, said, black people twice as likely to be arrested for pot
True.
in Colorado and Washington where it's legal. You may bring down the total arrest, but
it's-
we're going to get it. Blacks are going to get arrested.
But that's
just as
true
much,
everywhere.
Twice as much.
Legal, illegal, black and brown people get arrested for drug charges more
Well,
than white
then don't
people.
say
That
this
is
is gonna
that is
solve
an
the problem.
I never said
There was
that.
a black
And I've
caucus
in
that said
fact
that.
said the opposite.
We're still
Uh,
going to get it, right? Still going to go to jail.
Listen, they're two discrete
Send me your
issues.
card.
No,
You
what
don't
I
have a
just
card.
heard you
We're not
say,
talking
though-
about criminal justice reform. We're talking about getting sick people their medicine. The way that minority communities have been abused as a result of a racist drug war is not the topic that we're discussing. We can discuss that
I don't
topic,
think-
but
I'm talking
that
about
medical
people-
marijuana is not an
some of
answer
your
to
advocates have
that
said that.
problem.
It's not a silver bullet. Exactly. That's what the Department
It's
of
not
Health
any
said.
bullet. We're not.
And
It's
in
But
the
there are
states
people
that
who
have
use that
medical marijuana,
as
95 to 97% of the individuals with the medical recommendation have them for the other conditions. They don't have them for the pre-debilitating conditions that are listed in this amendment. 95 to 97% of them have them for the other conditions that this amendment keeps open wide for that to happen.
Like what? What kind of conditions?
Headaches, menstrual cramps. There's one in California that I saw that was for athlete's foot. I mean, this is what we're looking
in
for.
California, everyone has the most lax laws of any medical marijuana state.
Actually, this is more lax
That
than
is
California.
absolutely unequivocally false.
Would athlete's foot qualify under this
Depends on your
amendment?
doctor.
Well, how would
Depends
athletes
on your
foot-
doctor.
I cannot imagine that athletes.
Where
foot.
would one of these similar?
First of all,
how would you get
first of all,
athlete's foot
what
from?
is the marijuana
Or
treating
other.
in the athlete's
From
foot?
similar, so what, like
That-
PTSD?
That-
That a physician says meets the
From like
requirements.
PTSD, maybe.
Whatever
You
the
have
doctor
athlete's foot.
says.
For
Whatever your doctor
whatever
says.
condition that's on there that maybe has an itching component to it in its symptomology.
That's the
But
pill-
see, that's the
pill
problem.
mills.
We can't say, I don't think, when we are talking about a constitutional amendment. We can't say, I don't know.
Recommendation letters now.
We can't say, I don't think, when we are dealing with the state constitution and something that
No
will be
life.
permanently
Well, doctors
affixed
are not
the way
gonna be
it's
writing
written.
just any prescription because
It's
their
right,
license.
because it's not a prescription.
Because their license, it's on the line. They're not going to be writing just any
The pill
recommendation
mills
because it's their
docs do.
license.
The pill mill guys do.
Well, hold on. The notion that this is anything like a pill mill is ludicrous, and anybody who knows what the issue was with the pill mills could see why in the plain language, as it were, of the constitutional amendment. The issue with the pill mills is you can walk into a doctor's office, say, Doc, I have lower back pain. Doc says you should take OxyContin. You walk out of that room and you walk into a pharmacy that doctor owns and you get that OxyContin. Under this, and the Florida Department of Health has now said this not once but twice in their analysis of this constitutional amendment, a pill mill scenario is extremely unlikely because of the multi-step process for someone to become a qualified patient. You must go to your doctor, be diagnosed with a debilitating medical condition, receive a written certification from your physician certifying your use of medical marijuana, send that certification to the Department of Health, receive a state-issued ID card. It's a multi-step process that is not going to happen in the course of an hour-long visit to a doctor. You're not walking into a doctor's office and walking out with marijuana. That's what a pill mill was. This cannot happen under
Take
this
longer,
constitutional
that's all.
amendment.
I think
Okay, well, what I'd like to do is wrap it up. It's been a spirited debate, and obviously, there's a high emotion and passion, and I'd like to give you each like 60 seconds. What do you, talking to the camera here, tell people what you want them to know. Give it your best, make your best case. Clarence, you want to start?
Oh, legalization of marijuana for medical or any other reason is bad public policy. It's bad for the public safety, and in marijuana is not medicine. The White House Office of Drug Policy says so. The Florida Medical Association says so. No matter what the proponents say, they're really after ultimately legalizing this stuff, and a lot of kids are going to get hurt.
Okay, Ben, let's go to you now.
Sure. I think this is a pretty simple choice. There are 25 states plus Washington, D.C. that have medical marijuana. Florida should be the next one. Our doctors should be afforded the same rights that doctors in all those other states have to recommend a medical decision to their patients and for their patients to be able to follow that recommendation without either party becoming criminals. This is not a controversial notion for the vast majority of Floridians, and the vast majority of Floridians are compassionate, and they're not stupid, as our opposition likes to say. They're compassionate, and they've looked at this issue. This is not a new, novel issue. This is something that we've been having a long conversation with each other as a state about for the last almost 4 years now. And so I'd just like to ask you all to be that compassionate Florida voter and vote yes to approve Amendment 2 this November.
Jessica.
Thank you for paying attention to this spirited discussion. We appreciate it, and I would urge everyone, because we don't think you're stupid, we've never used that word, we want you to be educated. So please go and educate yourself on what this looks like in other states, and know that Florida is not a science experiment. Our children are not a science experiment. Our communities are not a science experiment. This is de facto legalization of marijuana. It is not prescribed by a pharmacist. It is at a pot shop with a bud tender. Our communities and our children are at risk with the products that will be available here and enshrined permanently in our Constitution. And please vote no in November.
Well, I'm begging voters to please vote yes for medical marijuana. This has been approved, that it has helped my son, it has helped many other patients. And this decision should be made between the doctor and the patient. I don't think anybody else knows the patient better than the actual doctor. So if your doctor recommends it, why not? Why not give a chance for my son and for patients to live and have a better quality of life? This is about compassion. We need this for patients. This is not, we're not talking recreational, we're gonna be smoking down the street. This is medicine. This is medicine for our family. This is medicine for patients. So please, I'm just begging on my son's behalf and on patients' behalf to vote yes for medical marijuana.
And we thank you all for paying attention. What is your website if people want to get more information?
VoteNo2.org.
And Ben?
We are unitedforcare.org.
Okay. Thank you. On behalf of Andrew and myself, we thank you for your time and attention. Get informed.